So, good morning, everybody. Ooh, we have an echo here. My name is Uwe. I'm delighted to introduce you to Swiss democracy, more particularly Swiss referendum democracy. So I will talk about what is and how it became. So I also will take you a bit to a journey to the past. You might know that we have these referendum votes in Switzerland quite frequently, so I want to also explain how this came about and kind of the battles that were fought in, I would say, in the 19th century. That was kind of the critical moment. These were the critical moments, defining moments for the referendum democracy as we find it today in Switzerland. And I want to do this as interactively as possible. So please interrupt me and ask questions immediately. So I don't want to have a monologue here and then just have a presentation for the next 2 hours. So feel free to immediately just raise your hand and we can have more or less of a debate and discussion about what I'm going to present. So my name is Uwe Serdült and I work on Swiss politics, Swiss referendum politics in a research center for democracy studies in Aarau, attached to the University of Zurich. So this is one of my jobs. We have a referendum results database there, and most of the empirical data I will show you comes from that referendum results database, which we operate for 25 years now. It covers referendum results on a national level globally and also covers the Swiss provinces since 1970. So I will share the address a bit later. So I want to directly start with how it actually is, how direct democracy is practiced in Switzerland. So I received this envelope at home. This is what you receive before an actual referendum vote takes place. And I will just give it to you guys here in the audience. And please just open it. So on the back, you have very detailed instructions on how to open the voting material. Fine, so this is open, and now let's just open it and tell me a bit what you find in there, right? So there's a basic envelope. On the envelope, it actually also tells you to make sure you sign your voting card. So and you find some brochures, right? So
some brochures explaining 18th of May 2025, I think that's the date when the referendum is held. Another brochure looks a bit thicker, maybe some kind of manual or something more detailed explanation, and a voting bulletin, I think, with 2 options, 1 and 2. For the canton of Aargau, another voting bulletin, or I don't know what's this. The city of Aarau. Yes.
And maybe now this is an important element. Turn it around. So actually, here you would have to sign. So if you don't sign this voting card, everything is nullified. So whatever you do on these voting cards here doesn't matter. And then your voting cards have to go into this envelope. So you have this envelope, right? And this is what you either mail in by post or you go and drop it at the. Thank you for opening it up. I will go through some of the elements here in a bit more detail. So we already established that we have these votes taking place on the cantonal level and also on the city level. We could have referendum votes on the national level as well, right? So this also gives you a hint at the very decentralized federal structure of Switzerland as a country. So it's quite extreme, I would say. Every 3-4 months we receive this, and we have 3 weeks to make up our minds and write a yes or a no on one of these voting cards, put it in the envelope and send it in, or look at what's up for the 18th of May. I will not go into detail of the votes on the city level, but here on the cantonal level, it's about the question asked here is, would you like to accept the change to the tax law from 3rd of December 2024? Second question, would you like to accept the citizens' initiative equal pay in the canton of Argo now? That's the title of this vote, and it already hints at these are two different things. The one is a citizens' initiative, and the other one is a change of a law, right? And it's very exciting stuff, right? Change of the tax code. So it only says, would you like to accept change of the tax code from the 3rd of December 2024? So what is it, right? What is it about? Therefore, we have this, and this is crucial, I think. You have this bulletin here, and they explain you what it's about. So you're supposed to read this, digest this, make up your, maybe discuss with your friends, colleagues, neighbors, read it in the news, make up your mind. And all this happens 3-4 times per year on all the levels. So national level, cantonal level, and local level. And throughout the year, like the long-term average on the national level is you have to deal with 9 of these votes on the national level, 4 or 5 on the cantonal level, and 3 or 4 on the local level. This adds up, right? And there's the first question here.
As I understand the brochure, it's a great idea and very necessary. But as I understand it, this is not like the legal text of the change, but this is a translation that's understandable. And my question would be, who holds the power of framing these brochures, where the maybe not legal literate decision maker then makes his decisions on?
Yes, it's a very good question, and it contains the legal text as well, right? So it can be much thicker sometimes. So it always contains the whole law and indicates the changes. But your question is a very good one, and this is was a long, let's say, also a long fight, actually. So who can frame what's in this brochure, right? And this was also established over the years and involved also court rulings. So as, let's say, if you came up with an idea and you are the Citizens Initiative Committee or part of the Citizens Initiative Committee, you have your 2 pages there as well. So the government cannot overrule or write into your 2 pages in there as well. So you have full right to frame this and describe it in your own words. Another problem you hinted at is that this is very frequently, this is the official brochure. So this is very often legal language. It's administrative lingo, not so easy to understand. So there's also these days considerable effort to make this understandable to the broader public and use simplified language also. So there's an NGO that provides brochures that explain this also with short videos. So all these videos are uploaded on YouTube. So the effort to explain these sometimes complex matters to the broader public are considerable. And again, this is actually these brochures here are this is the most printed publication in Switzerland, especially the national one, because it's distributed to everyone with voting rights. So, and yeah, learning about what's at stake and informing people about what's at stake is a huge effort in Swiss direct democracy. Of course, there's shortcuts, right? And not everyone is interested in, let's say, tax law, or maybe it's not your primary concern. So sometimes you simply opt out. We're going to talk about turnout a bit later on. Or there's these heuristic shortcuts. So if you don't want to read it all, you could just check what do politicians you like, or what do political parties you identify with, what do they say? And that's also a very important element in Swiss politics, in the newspapers. And by the way, the news papers, they need to cover these votes in a fair way. They need to give kind of equal, they need to give equal attention to both sides. For referendum votes, typically you have two camps, the pro committee and the no committee, and the contra committee. And they also get their say in the Swiss newspapers. So Swiss newspapers for politics, for these referendum votes, they need to stay a bit neutral, right? So, and these kind of where political parties stand on all these topics, that's also printed kind of every week, almost on a daily basis before a referendum vote takes place. These referendum votes, they always take place on a weekend, traditionally. Traditionally on a weekend because you used to go to church Sunday morning, right? And right after church, when it was a referendum or referendum day, you just went out of church and put your vote in the ballot box. So that was highly connected, is not the case anymore. So the frequency is kind of a bit crazy in Switzerland. You also have to imagine what this means for all political parties, for the whole political apparatus. So it never stops. It's an ongoing thing. And after an election is kind of before the next, after a referendum is before the next referendum. And it's not like in four years or so when you have the next election, it's in 3 months already. You have to prepare for the next campaign already if you're in politics. So all these referendum votes, doesn't surprise you then that Switzerland accounts for about a quarter of all referendum votes worldwide. And you can find, you have the source here. So this website I was referring to is report.rdb.vote. And you kind of find a lot of statistics and descriptive stuff about referendum votes worldwide. So deadly, we have a lot of these votes. For my taste, is already a bit much, right? Why do I personally think it's a bit much? Because I would say the ideal situation is when we have one issue, one citizens' initiative or one law change on the ballot, and we can thoroughly discuss this, and the attention is fully for this one particular referendum vote. What happens these days in Switzerland, as I mentioned before, you have and we saw it here, you have a couple of cantonal votes and you have a couple of city votes, and sometimes, this time not 18th of May, but usually also have national votes. In practice, this means that one or several of these ballot issues suffer from, they don't get as much attention as the others get. Usually there is one that is highly debated or attracts the media more, is more attractive, and also kind of maybe also more interesting for the broader public and the news, and the others kind of suffer a bit. So you discuss them a bit less. And I think this is not an ideal situation for referendum votes. Not every vote gets the same attention. So I think we have a little bit of a problem here. Let's see how all this developed and how did this come up in Switzerland, a bit going back to history. So here we have a picture of the Landsgemeinde, as it's called, in the canton of Glarus. We still have this it used to be the traditional way, right? So the men, and only the men, I will come to that point later on, they meet on the public square and they vote by raising their hand, in the early days even raising their sword, right? So because having voting rights had to do something with having property, being armed, and then gradually this kind of opened up, and nowadays you don't need a sword anymore, you don't need to be a man anymore. It's opened up over the century, but it took quite a while to do that, and we had to go to several struggles. I will tell you more about this. This vote by show of hands in the canton of Glarus just happened this Sunday. So traditionally, and it's only still alive, this tradition, in 2 of the smaller cantons in Switzerland. All the others have abandoned it because there's also practical problems, right? In the bigger cantons, assembling everyone on the main square for a vote by show of hands is kind of difficult logistically to do. Not everyone fits in there.
How can it be considered democratic if the voting is not secret? If other people can see where I'm raising my hand for, I would say that I wouldn't even accept this as a democratic vote, honestly, anymore.
Again, very good question. And of course, this is also something for the Constitutional Court, right? So how can the Constitutional Court in Switzerland somehow accept a vote by show of hands where everybody sees what you're doing? So no vote secrecy at all. And they accept it because it's the tradition. And it's the wish of these people to continue with this tradition. So on several occasions, they had also even referendum votes, secret votes, whether they want to, in addition to like the vote by show of hands, they can also have the vote at the ballot, right? So, but in elections, they do it like that. So they kind of confirm the government also by a show of hands. And in the extreme case, you can even, if you participate there and you're a citizen, you can move forward, say, hey, I have a suggestion. You present your suggestion and you can then have an immediate vote. So it's very direct. It's even more direct than the other elements of direct democracy we have in Switzerland. There was another question. I don't know if you have a second microphone somewhere. Yep. Maybe it's not on. No. Or maybe please use the microphone because of the broadcast. Actually, it's not for yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there any evidence that the smaller cantons that have preserved more elements of direct democracy have better outcomes? Better outcomes of any sort, really? Like, are they better governed?
Yeah, that's it's very difficult to assess the outcome of direct democracy in general, you know. But I would say I wouldn't say that these two cantons are better off in any respect. Any benchmark you take, whether it's whether you ask them whether they're happier or whether they're better off financially, economically, I don't think so. I don't think we can make that statement. It's really just a tradition, and this is kind of the old way we do it, and it's not only done in the two cantons, it's also practiced very much in the municipalities, right? So we have our 26 cantons in Switzerland, right? So this hints a bit to the fact that it's a very decentralized federal country. These 26 cantons, you can consider them as like small states. They are small countries. They all have their constitutions. They all have their quite a high financial autonomy compared to other countries. So they're really microstates that operate under the umbrella of the federal constitution. So legally how it works is that, you know, of course, they have to conform to national legislation. That also doesn't go without disruption. And then we have the more than 2,000 municipalities. And you can see some of them are really quite small. And also for the cantons, we could see that some of them are quite small. So all these differences are kind of accepted in Switzerland. And the point I wanted to make regarding these gatherings and vote by show of hands, it's still practiced in the municipalities in about 80% of the municipalities. So the large majority, they still do this. Right, so they meet, they have fixed dates, they do it twice a year, and usually the first one happens in spring. So what they do, they review what happened last year, especially the financial part. So they look at how the money was spent last year, and then the people who go to these town hall meetings, by raising the hand or not, they have to accept what the local government did in the last year. And they would then also, in the meeting in fall, the town meeting in fall, they would prepare or sanction the budget that was prepared by the government for operating in the next year. Again, the budget must be approved by show of hands. So this is quite, extreme, but very much practiced. And if this is practiced on the local, cantonal, and national level, so frequently, you can imagine that it's really deeply ingrained in the political culture of Switzerland to have these meetings and votes all the time. There's two more questions. Yeah, sorry. Forgot about that. So this is just showing you where most of the people live. So the darker, the denser the population. So most people live here in this kind of along Lake Geneva, and then all the way up to Zurich. That's where the majority of people live. Population density, yes, correct.
I have a small question on the map. What are there like blue parts on it that is not in scale?
These are lakes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you.
It's not a special territory or anything like that. These are lakes. But there's more questions.
In terms of attendance at the municipality level, I'm assuming only a few hundred people show up to vote on the budget or accept the government. Does that reflect a problem, like a democratic problem, that only a small portion of the people who actually show up are able to have the democratic impact?
Yes, there's a constant debate on that, and some municipalities that are like a bit too large already because obviously the larger ones cannot have these gatherings anymore. So they moved to a system with parliaments, right? So they introduced a parliament instead of these town hall meetings. But the smaller ones still keep it, and this is exactly what is frequently discussed. Only a minority shows up. So there are studies showing that on average, what you have there is 3 to 5% of the electorate would show up to these. Occasionally, if it's like really a big buzz and maybe millions of bucks spent, it mobilizes maybe 10, 20% of the municipality. But this is considered to be okay in Swiss democracy and not so much considered to be a problem. I will also come back to that when I speak a bit more about some older historical forms of direct democracy, and it nicely relates to that. So I will take it up a bit later on. But it's generally accepted.
Is it highly polarizing? Do politicians always have an opinion, a position on the issue? And are there cases where decisions are reverted, I don't know, 1 or 2 years later?
Yeah, the last part first. So it's completely possible to come up with there's nobody kind of can prevent. You come back with exactly the same issue 1 or 2 years later. It's possible. It's maybe a waste of resources and your time, but let's say if the result was very narrow, like if it was and we have these votes, like it was a 50.1%, it can happen. So you could come back any time later and try again. There are topics we vote frequently. Let's say anything related to social security, so how we spend the money, how we finance our pension funds and so forth. That comes back frequently. And you could also have votes trying to ban nuclear energy, right? And introducing more, like transforming into more green energy and having a ban on nuclear energy. And we currently have in Switzerland a ban on building new ones, not the existing ones, but there's a ban on building new nuclear power stations. But if it doesn't make sense anymore, we can come back to that. So it's never set in stone. Everything's open, and you can keep coming back to something. Yeah, it happens a lot. It happens a lot. And okay, the first part is about polarization. So what's the effect of this? Does it have a polarizing effect? There are times in history that were more polarized than what we see now in Switzerland. Remember where Switzerland comes from. In the 19th century in Switzerland, we had a civil war. we forgot about this, but it was a religious war. Catholics fought the Protestants. We had uprisings in the early 20th century. Social Democrats fought, or Social Democrats and Communists fought the more bourgeois parties in the streets. So, of course, it's now peaceful and less polarized than then, but there's another factor leading to depolarizing. Imagine, as I said before, you have these referendum votes so frequently, and on one Sunday, you have, that's the advantage of having several votes on the ballot on one Sunday. So what happens to you personally on a Sunday when there's, let's say, 6 issues on the ballot? It's very likely that you win and lose on the same day. The Social Democrats, they win and lose on the same day. The Christian Democrats, they win and lose on the very same day. So it kind of equals out. We call this, in Switzerland, we have cross-cutting cleavages in the country, right? So they cancel each other out, and direct democracy actually helps for doing that, which also means that it's probably not a good idea to introduce these instruments in a country where you always have the same 2 sides fighting each other. So you cannot export this. Just sometimes, let's say, Swiss officials, ambassadors, they have a tendency of praising Swiss direct democracy, and this is the best way, and they suggest this as something that could be exported to other countries. And I usually say, stop, wait a minute. You really have to be very careful about what you're doing. You could bring direct democracy, these referendum votes, to a country, and you could shut this country down, right? You could lead this country in a decade-long political conflict, so it can have polarizing effects as well. It works in Switzerland, maybe also because of a historical coincidence, that these kind of, the language communities, the city and countryside cantons, the bigger ones and the smaller ones, the predominantly Protestant cantons, predominantly Catholic cantons, it all cancels out. And that's just historical luck, I would say. And that allows us to operate this system in this country. But there was another question.
I have a question about the representatives in this democracy system. How do you elect the people in the parliament or the administration in a Gemeinde? In the Gemeindes, there is any kind of representation, or is always on site with the hands and all of this?
In the smaller municipalities, you have the government is elected just like in a normal election. And they identify with the party, but on the small municipal level, sometimes they're not even a member of party. They don't even formally identify with a party. The higher you go, you must identify with a party, you're a party member. So the higher you go from municipal, cantonal to national, it's more like standard political system with parliaments and government and so forth. But it's another effect of this direct democracy, which I will talk about also a bit later, or maybe in a future session, is also that what's the effect on members of parliament and politicians when you have these direct democratic instruments there? Because these, I'm going to go in more detail, but these direct democracy instruments mean that you can always come back to, you can decide something in parliament, but maybe the people don't like it. They start to collect signatures and there's a vote. So you have to be very careful what you do. You always have to, we say it's the Damocles sword of direct democracy. Always, anything the government or parliament does, they always must think twice oh, could this trigger a referendum vote? And then we lose everything. So it kind of has a quite sobering effect on what government does and what parliament does, and also had the effect of including all the major political forces into the government. So what we have for let's say more than 100 years in Switzerland is a large coalition government. So if you discuss large coalition, große Koalition in Germany now for a couple of years, we do this for centuries already, because you have to co-opt all these political forces into the system. Otherwise, they would constantly use these direct democratic instruments to go after everything they do in government. There was one more question here.
So you mentioned one phenomenon in your talk that I see as the most relevant of all, and that is the hand-raising votes and the traditional resilience of updating obsolete customs with a rising technology. And I would want to ask you, how realistic would it be if there can be a compatible solution with the Swiss constitution and with the Swiss self-understanding of civic autonomy? If we build something like that on blockchain that is actually anonymous, is it realistic if it's like understandable why it's better and safe to be accepted as a new also Swiss way in these municipalities, or is it rather a really hard fight? And how could we sell that or update that? It's not something that, it's not a consumer product to sell, it's like security standards to update in.
Yeah, also it's jumping a bit, because I would still like to talk a bit about how this all developed. And if I may, I would like to take this for a future session, because today I still talk about the basics, and then what does technology, or how can technology come in? I would like to take it up a bit later, so it's sorry for that. Let me move on a bit with history of direct democracy in Switzerland, to give you an understanding also how long it took historically to develop all this over time, right? So everything grew from bottom up, I would say. And all the elements we see now on the national level, they first were established on the lower, let's say mainly the cantonal level. So after all these, Switzerland was a politically very unstable country. So after the French Revolution, in this time, it went back to a more centralized government and decentralized government. Napoleon was very important also in unifying Switzerland and establishing it as a country. And so in the 1830s, something important happened. It became customary, it became a custom to vote on a new constitution. So that was kind of the start. So you needed everybody to agree on a new constitution. Somebody drafted, maybe a constitutional committee, somebody drafted the constitution, but then you needed to sanction this, you needed to have a vote of the people. People at that time, men, right? So when Zuitzerland on the website says, I a little bit had to smile, of course, is 700 years of democracy. I tell my students, Switzerland, the democracy, yeah, 1970. 1970. Before that, women excluded, right? So that's quite, it's really a very dark, black stain in the history of Swiss democracy. We have a question there in the back.
So in a lot of countries before the introduction of female suffrage right to vote, the majority of women were actually against being allowed to vote. What was the case in Switzerland? What was the opinion polling on that at the time?
Well, the thing is,
Did the women want to vote, basically? That's
yeah,
the question.
they wanted to have voting rights, and there was a
And
movement for that.
And do you know, like quantitatively, like what say the percentages were of women who actually wanted the right?
They
Or
couldn't vote.
Say again?
They couldn't vote.
No, I know, but say before, so I know that basically, say in the French cantons in the 50s, women could vote, and it sort of went canton by canton.
Yes.
What I'd like to understand is that basically before they were allowed to vote, like, what percentage of them wanted to, right? Because it wasn't 100%.
It wasn't 100%, but I don't know the exact numbers because we didn't have surveys yet in that way. But there was a clear. They expressed ideas very clearly, and there was a clear movement that actually they wanted to have equal rights. But there were several referendum votes on that matter. I think three of them. And the men always declined the women this right? So it really took 1970s, 1971 is also not by accident, because we had kind of the whole women's labor movement and a lot of things culturally also. We had a cultural revolution end of the 60s, which also traveled from the United States to Europe and also Switzerland. So it took all these steps for, and that's a general question, right? In a democratic setting, are people willing to extend the rights they have to more people? And with the Swiss history here, we see when we look at these dates here, it took a long time, right? It took a long time. Maybe we can be forgiving and say, okay, that's the path they had to go through. But nowadays, maybe we're not so forgiving anymore, and it would be more difficult to accept.
Bit of a spicy question, no? Why is this not just considered tradition, like with the hand raise voting, which I equally consider undemocratic than not letting women vote? Why is this not equally, yeah?
I think all of this is kind of consensus, right? So we need to establish a consensus of what we consider to be democratic and not so democratic, and certain practices like the show of hands is considered to be okay. It's just a general understanding we have, and that might change as well one day, right? So that's why most of these cantons moved away from this system. They thought it's much fairer if we have a parliament and the normal referendum votes, and move away from this show of hands. But on the small scale, in the municipality, it's still very much accepted, right? You see what your neighbor votes. And this is, it's kind of, we also have a political culture in Switzerland where this is accepted, right? So maybe it doesn't work in other settings.
Why it's different if a woman? Why?
Yeah, I can see your point. It's different because we consider it is to be okay. It's kind of through debate and consensus, it's accepted.
But it was considered okay before because the men voted no on the referendums.
Yes,
So
but
it
only
was democratic before to exclude women equally like the hand raise.
we don't know because they didn't have a say, right? They didn't have a say.
Yeah, back then they didn't have a vote. Back then they were not the stakeholder.
But does democracy have to do with demographics, or is it still a democratic decision if the democratic vote says no to a certain demographic? Is that not democratic? Maybe it's unjust, maybe it's unequal, but is it not democratic?
It's limited democratic, but if only a fraction of the people can decide for all the others, it's not considered to be democratic, right? So that's what we see historically here, what you see with the dates here. So in 1848, the modern Swiss constitution, for the first time, they established that everybody has the same right. Before that, you had like noblemen who had political rights because they had property and they were armed, right? So this understanding completely changed with the French Revolution. It took 50 years after the French Revolution to establish that everybody has the same right, whether you're nobleman or not. And a big debate also, yeah, even Jews, they're considered to be men, and they're also allowed to have voting rights. Then took a lot of time until we had the women. Then we had the debate of integrating more younger people, so the voting age was lowered from 20 to 18 years, and we are now debating whether it should even be lowered to 16 years. And one canton, the one which with the raising of by voting by the raising of hands, canton of Glarus, for cantonal matters, they have voting age 16, right? So it also shows you in Switzerland, it's so decentralized. One canton can say on cantonal matters, yeah, 16 is fine. On national level, you need to be 18, right? So it's very heterogeneous, and this decentralized, heterogeneous way of doing politics is accepted. It's accepted in Switzerland. Then it was extended to Swiss living abroad. So we constantly have 700,000 people, 10% of the Swiss population constantly abroad. They're going studying, they're expats, but they come back at some time. So this had also quite big influence on the different voting channels, but I will come back to that tomorrow probably. Then on the local level or on the cantonal level, we have cantons that allow foreigners to vote, right? So not on the national level, especially some German-speaking cantons also don't want to have it on the cantonal level, but in particularly French-speaking cantons are much more open. Of course, you need a certain number of years of residency in a particular canton, let's say 5, 9, 10 years. After that, automatically, you can also participate in these referendum votes. And there are you vote on financial matters, you vote on laws, so you vote on very important matters. And this is, I would say now, this is the current battlefield about Swiss direct democracy, whether it should be extended to everybody living there and paying taxes there. So we will see later on in examples that the tax thing, the finances, no taxation without, no representation without no taxation without representation. That's an interesting, that's a very important kind of norm we also sometimes apply.
Does immigration policy happen partly on a municipal or cantonal level so that expats would actually be able to lower the defenses in one canton so that people could invade from the mass immigrate from the outside? If foreigners have voting rights, is the level where they have voting rights affecting immigration policies in Switzerland?
No, I don't think so. It's not a decisive factor. However, this is another big democratic debate in Switzerland. So who should give citizenship? And in Switzerland, it happens on the local level. So you cannot become a citizen in Switzerland without first getting it on the local level. But that would be a whole other session. I don't want to discuss mainly discuss immigration and immigration rights now. Yeah, maybe one more point before we do a 5 minutes break, I suggest. one last point here. In Swiss referendum votes, we vote on all kinds of topics. And you can see from our database, you can see over time from the 19th century up to today. Why I'm showing this? Because it's different in other countries. In other countries, a lot of these topics, and the topics you can see, topics are like energy, economy, agriculture, but also financial stuff. In many other countries where you also have referendum votes, some of these would not be allowed. Some of the topics are not allowed. In particular, financial matters would be taken out. And in Switzerland, the field is wide open. Almost nothing is forbidden. So only if you go against basic human rights. For example, you cannot launch a citizens' initiative introducing torture, for example. This goes against basic human rights. So that's a boundary that's there. But other than that, it's wide open. And all the laws and all unconstitutional clauses can be touched by referendum votes. And the result, that's another important design feature, the results are binding, right? People vote, a bit later the law would come into force. So it's not just kind of consultative, it's a binding vote. Yeah.
What if the status quo is basic human rights questionable and the referendum would make it more human rights compatible? I mean, the vote raising hand would be one good example. The same protection would not apply. Like if the status quo is questionable, it's tradition, but if you start a new referendum that's against basic human rights, it's not acceptable. Is this how it works?
I think Switzerland signed all these basic human rights treaties, so the Constitution of Switzerland cannot go against them. You could probably launch, but it's in case of doubt, authorities would still probably let it through, and then eventually would have to be nullified by courts. In that case, it's a tricky, if you would hand in a citizens' initiative that goes against these basic human rights, it would be not accepted by the authorities. So there is kind of a test before it can come to a vote, right? But they have a tendency of letting through quite a lot. But if it goes against basic human rights, or if it's something that cannot be implemented, some silly initiative of let's get rid of the Matterhorn because we want to have a view on Italy, it's practically not possible to do that, so it's not acceptable as an initiative.
I want to read Article 3 of the Human Rights Act. Article 3 of the Human Rights Act requires the government to support your right to free expression by holding free elections at reasonable intervals. These elections must enable you to vote in secret, period.
Yeah, so on the national level, this is the case, right? So, and on the lower level, it's somehow considered to be tradition, but this system with the raise of your hands, it doesn't exclude all the other instruments. You have them as well, and there's safeguards. So if there's something you don't like and it goes through a vote in a municipality by show of hands, and let's say there's 10% of people that don't like this, they want it, and they say also there were only 30 people there, right? So they can take this to a secret vote. They can do that. So these safeguards also exist. But you're right, and I'm not here to defend like the the Swiss system through and through. There are gray areas, right? But let's take a 5 minutes break, I would say, to breathe a bit and get some fresh air, and then I would continue.
If everybody could please take their seats, we're about to start
All right.
again soon. We're starting now. Please take your seats. Please wrap up conversations. Thank you.
You can tell me when to continue. Okay, good. Thanks for this first session. That was really how I imagined it, with a lot of interruptions and questions from your side. So let's continue in the same way. I would like to explain a bit the historical development of Swiss direct democracy by going through these other years here. So I already mentioned 1848, the modern Swiss constitution. And then let's say we had the whole second part of the 19th century was, I would say, characterized by the democratic movement. It was called the democratic movement. So there was a movement, political movement, pushing for more democratic participation and pushing for the adoption of more direct democratic tools. This, as you can see from the years here, this took decades of political, peaceful battles, sometimes highly polarized, but it was mainly a battle of the, let's say in the religious civil war, the Catholics lost the war. The Catholics were the minority in the country, so then later on, through political means, they tried to establish minority rights or veto rights they could use in the political battle, not to be outvoted, for example, by the predominant Protestant cantons. So basically, most cantons, in a way, had to choose whether they wanted to be predominantly Catholic or Protestant. So some mixed, of course, also. So in 1874, they managed to have what we call the optional referendum in the constitution. What does it mean? The optional referendum means you don't need to have a mandatory referendum. Mandatory referendums are for constitutional changes. So whenever, let's say, Parliament changes the constitution or wants a new constitution, this was already, as I told you before, this was already established in the 1830s in the cantons. Whenever the constitution changes, you need to have a vote on that, even for amendments or partial changes. And then in 1874, it was established that whenever Parliament passes a new bill, a law, it can be challenged by a minority or whoever manages to gather nowadays 50,000 signatures in 100 days. Like, you have a grace period of 100 days, which is also a safeguard. You can come back to something Parliament decided. Maybe it was not in sync with what the population thinks. Political elites sometimes tend to have their own ideas of what is good for the people. And the people here, or a certain elite thinks, let's say predominantly Protestant elite thinks something is good for the country, they pass a law, and you can challenge that later on. So this is also a political right that goes back to the cantons. So it was built as well. It's this whole repertoire of political rights, direct democratic rights, was built in this kind of on the cantonal level. And what happened in 1831 in the canton of St. Gallen is that they were able to enshrine the veto right into the cantonal constitution of St. Gallen. So the veto right is kind of a proto-optional referendum. And just to illustrate that it's not just words and for the sake of the better argument, when they had the Constitutional Convention in St. Gallen to draw up the new constitution, around 600 men armed with sticks kind of marched to the kind of governmental building in St. Gallen and demanded for the veto right to be written into the cantonal constitution. And the veto right at that time meant that you had in every municipality of the canton 50 men needed to trigger the opposition towards a law. So in all municipalities, 50 men needed to trigger opposition to a law that was already passed. And then the population needed to have a vote on this, and all this within, I think, only 40 days or 45 days. So within a very short time frame, you needed to mobilize and have the initiation of the instrument, and then have a vote by all the people. And you needed not only the majority of the people who were there, but also at that time it was customary to count anyone who abstained as a yes vote to the status quo. So if you didn't show up, you were counted as accepting the status quo. So it means if you didn't manage to mobilize more than half of the people to turn up and in addition vote against the law in all the municipalities, it didn't go through. So these were quite strict conditions for a veto to go through. Almost impossible to make it. But this is the prototype for what we now have as the optional referendum. We don't count the votes that way anymore. But if you look at how the first constitution of Switzerland in 1848, how some of the canton counted the votes, they did it the same way. If you didn't show up, you were counted as if you were in favor. So this is also quite interesting, historically speaking. Now let me jump to 1891. 1891 is the date when the Citizens' Initiative was written into the Swiss constitution when it was accepted. There was a previous attempt which didn't go through, but then in 1891 it went through. So this is another breakthrough. It means that you cannot only vote on your constitution, you cannot only oppose to a law that already passed in parliament. Now you can already write into the constitution. So you can start a movement, a political group. You write 2-3 sentences. If you are a new constitutional clause, you can add something new to the constitution, or you can amend something to the constitution, or you can abolish a sentence in the constitution. So you can do all these 3 things. If you're able to convince 100,000 people to sign up for this within 18 months. This is now what we have in Switzerland as the Citizens' Initiative. And in example of Canton of Aargau, what is at stake at the 18th of May, we had the tax law, right? So this was a referendum. Somebody didn't like the tax law, so now they opposed, and now we have to vote on the tax law. The other one was a citizens' initiative. So they collected signatures from supporters. Now we have to vote on this. If it goes through, it becomes law, or the constitution is changed. So the constitution in Switzerland changes all the time. In 1921, these direct democratic rights was extended to international treaties. And now is more detailed, but I don't want to go into this detail. But basically, we can also, so that's why in Switzerland, we vote on treaties. The free trade agreement with Indonesia, we vote on it. The free trade agreement with European Union, we vote on it. So bilateral treaties with the European Union, we vote on that. So, and this also came from the cantons, because in the cantons you vote on treaties as well, right? So the whole repertoire we have on the national level, it all comes from bottom up and then disperses. A bit more, here some more design elements of this. This participation quorum doesn't exist anymore. I already mentioned it. It's a binding vote. And as a safeguard for the religious minorities originally and the smaller cantons, for constitutional changes to take effect, you need to pass a double majority. What is a double majority? Double majority means you need the majority of the citizens that vote on a national level, but you also need a majority of the 23 full cantons. So the 26, the 3 of the cantons are actually half cantons. So you need 13 plus 13 and a half cantons also in favor of a constitutional change for it to go through. The voting channels, I will leave that. So these, if you look just again as an illustration for how heterogeneous this is regulated in the Swiss cantons. Here you have the signature thresholds for citizens' initiatives in the Swiss cantons, right? So what is the percentage of citizens you need to convince so that a citizen initiative vote will be triggered? I don't even want to go into detail, but again, it shows you that it can go from like 1% or even below 1% to 4%. So these thresholds, again, in Switzerland, this huge diversity is accepted. In many other countries, you would not have that. The national level would somehow say it must be 3% or it must be 2%, everything else is not accepted. In Switzerland, we let the cantons decide what is the best threshold themselves. It's actually a good question I ask myself sometimes. What would be a fair threshold be? I don't have the answer yet, but I'm thinking. about that. On the national level, it's roughly 1% also, or even below 1%. We discussed the turnout also. So turnout is on average relatively low, as you can see here. Historically speaking, it used to be higher because historically speaking, it was kind of mandatory for you to participate in these events. So still, one canton still has it. Schaffhausen still has this kind of, you are obliged to participate in referendum votes. And Schaffhausen has considerable higher turnout rates because of that reason. If you don't comply, the consequences are not huge. So if you don't comply, you pay a fine of $6, I think. So, and it's automatically put on your tax bill, I think. So, but still, I mean, if you never go, it's kind of always, you have to pay a little bit of a fine, actually, if you don't go. And many cantons had this requirement, but it was taken out of constitutions. So the average turnout rate is quite low, and you could say, yeah, is this still democratic if only, let's say for this referendum, for these referendums in the canton of Aargau, 18th of May, I expect around, because it's tax matters are quite boring, not a lot of people will turn out, even though of course it's hugely important because it's about tax, right? But still people consider this to be boring. My prediction is 33 to 35% will turn out for this vote. Not more than 50, no way. But why is this, in my view, this is not such the low average turnout rates in Switzerland is not such a huge problem. Why? Because remember, we go every 3-4 months. It never stops on all the levels. And if you actually calculate the turnout in a cumulative way, which I was able to do thanks for the vote registry of the canton of St. Gallen, and you can also do it in Geneva, for being also open to researchers. So you can actually have a copy of the vote registry and whether people, of course you don't see how they voted, but you can see whether they participated or not, right? So you can check in St. Gallen, you can take, I took 14 consecutive votes, and you can see on the first vote here only 45% participated, but when already the second vote, you just accumulate everybody who goes extra in addition to the ones who were already there in the first vote, you add them up. So you add up, you add up, you add up, and in the end, for the 15th consecutive vote, 15 votes is roughly one legislature, you are at 80%. So what does it mean? 80% in 4 years turned out at least once in a referendum vote. That's what this graph here means. You can also do other interesting calculations with the same vote registry data. I also checked which age groups turn out in referendum votes, and I made difference between the sexes here. So you have, this is men and women, and you can see that the younger generation abstains to a much higher degree. So these are the ones that abstain. And the striking difference is here, the older age group. So it means that older women abstain much more than men. I have my interpretation. What do you think? What is the reason? Why is this the case? Anyone with a hunch? Yeah, sorry.
Could those be people before 1971?
Yes, I think that's exactly what happened. So we also democratic behavior and turning out and being interested in politics. It's an acquired habit. You have something we call political socialization, and you learn this from early on. It's a habit to develop, and these women who were at the time I did the statistics, were older. Their habit was not to turn out, right? So they only, and even when they received, some of them, yes, sure, they changed their habit, but most of them continued the habit even after 1970 when they got the voting rights. So this is unfortunately very sticky, these cultural norms, and they were, nobody took care of them. There were no special programs how to reintegrate them into politics. Everybody thought it's just enough to give them voting rights, give them suffrage, and that's it, right? On the other hand, for young people, we do a lot, right? So we think the young people should be interested in politics. We have all these programs, but the women who finally got suffrage in 1971, they were completely forgotten, right? And here you see the effect. You still see it in the vote registry. Okay, now I would like to show you in more detail how it looks on the local level. How is it organized on the local level in a small city where I actually live and also where our research center is located? So we have the normal setup. We have the mandatory referendum whenever the municipal charter is changed. We have the optional referendum to come back to something that happened in parliament. Aarau has a parliament, is big enough to have a parliament. So within 30 days, you mobilize 10% of the electorate. This is all written into the law of political rights, the cantonal law of political rights. This applies to, it's kind of organized in a hierarchical way. So each canton has a right for has a law for political rights, which then applies to all the municipalities on that territory. So you have the optional referendum, you have the citizens' initiative, again 10% of the electorate. What I want to get to is, are these financial expenses here? And, yep. Oh, sorry. It doesn't matter, you can, but thank you for pointing this out. I can only see it here. So I want to focus on the financial part, which is also quite striking, because in most countries, the budget, financial matters, this is really the privilege of parliament and government. No one can touch that. Of course, now we have kind of also a new movement with digital tools, so it opens up. We have participatory budgeting. I will maybe speak about that in a later session. But traditionally, the budget, expenses, how the tax money is spent, it's the parliament and the government. They usually the government suggests something, and the parliament then decides. There's a question or comment.
Yes, I just have a question of understanding on the optional referendum, because there is also this case where you say upon parliamentary decision. But as I understand it, I mean the parliament proposes a legislation or something, in which cases would they themselves then say, okay, we need an optional referendum? For me, it's a bit confusing.
Okay. So this is a special case. I never really explained it. We have an additional tool which is called an extraordinary optional referendum. It's a lot more detailed than what I show here, actually. And this is, again, is minority protection. So in Parliament, if a minority of Parliament thinks this should be put forward to the people, they can request it as well. So, because the majority of Parliament decides for a law, a minority in Parliament can challenge that and say it's important enough, we should have a vote by the people, right? So this is an additional instrument I didn't mention, and maybe that was a bit confusing. But you can see what else is put to a vote, and it's mandatory. It tells you how strong this is. You cannot go around it. And the effect of this is that in Switzerland, politicians, the government, politics, and people, they're much closer to the citizens than in other countries. I think that's part of the political culture that is really different. And it starts at the municipal level. It's much more this communal effect of, it's not them, the politicians. This is us. We manage this together. And if you decide to build, if you think it's a good idea to build a new school, and the new school costs, in Switzerland can easily cost 10, 12 million, right? It's above the threshold. It triggers automatically, that's what mandatory referendum means, it automatically triggers a vote, right? We of course, many of you think of smart contracts immediately, so it automatically triggers a vote. If there's, and that's for a single expense, building a new bridge, building a new school, building a new home for elderly and so forth. If it's a recurrent expense above the threshold, and these thresholds, they constantly negotiated, they sometimes have to be adjusted to inflation and so forth, so above 400,000, again, it triggers a mandatory vote. And what is also very extreme is that, what do we have here? The budget, right? You see it here. How does this look in the city of Aarau? This is the mandatory annual budget referendum. So every year in November, in other municipalities this is decided by show of hands, but we don't have this anymore. So every year I'm asked as a citizen, do you want to accept the budget of year such and such for municipality of Aarau with a tax rate of, that's then technical stuff, of 94%, as compared to the whole, to other, in comparison to kind of a benchmark thing. But everybody living in a municipality in Switzerland knows this is our tax rate, this is how high taxes will be, and based on that tax rate we came up with a budget, and now we ask your permission to apply this next year. And there's no way around that. Every year we have this mandatory vote, and this is super strong, of course. Again, it's taxpayers' money, it's our money, we can decide whether we want to spend that. Debate typically, or opposition typically happens when the government, allowed by Parliament, tries to increase the tax rate, right? So then it starts to get a bit maybe polarized, and the debate is heating up. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes,
so
sure.
This is 24th November, so this is the date you receive it. Then do you have 1 month until the end of the year to vote whether you accept or not?
So the vote is in November 2013 for the budget of next year.
Okay, yeah.
So we vote yes, and then they can, next year they can use that budget.
And what if the vote is no?
If they say no, yeah, good question, of course. They could say no, then they would usually come up, and it happens, even in Aarau it happened. So they would have to, they are forced to come up with a new budget. So they would consult the political parties and people, and they would try to find out why. Usually they already know why it didn't go through, and they would come up with a new budget, and they would have to go through another vote, and if that one doesn't go through, they don't have a budget. What to do then? What would you do? Or what could be the rule? Just invent something.
No politician is paid until there's budget voted.
Sorry, can you say again?
No politician is paid until there's a budget that's voted.
It's not enough. You know, in Switzerland, the pay is not so high. On the local level, they make local level parliament, they get nothing. No, so this wouldn't work, actually. They get a bit of session money, so whenever they sign in, they get a bit of session money, but it's like 30, 50 bucks, it's nothing. But there's, okay, I will tell you how it's regulated. There's municipal level, cantonal level, and national level. So the higher level would step in. So the cantonal government would, if you can't agree, then sorry, we have to step in and we decide. So usually they talk to each other, and also the cantonal government usually they rule in favor of the people, because going against the people kind of difficult in this political culture. So the higher level steps in. And we have this for other stuff as well. So the women's right to vote. One canton, even after 1971, one of these conservative small cantons with this deeply rooted tradition of only men voting by raise of the sword, you know, they couldn't be convinced to give the women already had voting rights on the national level. On the cantonal level, they still didn't want to give it to them. So finally the federal court had to step in, and you know, despite the tradition and everything, you know, now it's time, and they kind of had to step in. So this can happen as well, but as long as they can, they drag it out and try not to do it. I don't know, I want to slowly come to an end and not blindly go through all of that. What else? Yeah, this one here maybe. This is also illustrates a bit how this decentralized federal system works. So it's hierarchical in a way. Whatever you do on the municipal level, it has to fit into the constitution and the law of the canton. Whatever the canton does has to fit into the laws and the national constitution. So in that way, it is hierarchical. Higher courts can step in and rule. So there's a legitimate question. This show by hand on the municipal level, what is actually left there to decide? Because a lot of the expenses in particular are tied. So maybe you have to build some roads, and the expenses are tied. So what these 3-4% of people who show up in the town hall meeting votes by show of hand, what is left for them to decide? And we can see here, we analyzed it for 20 of the smallest municipalities in the canton of Aargau. So 40% of everything they decide is just waving it through, because they just have to implement what was already decided on a higher level. So they're not completely independent, right? Nobody is completely autonomous. So this is all highly integrated in Swiss federalism. Autonomy is somewhat restricted, another almost 40%. So what is really left for them to decide is 23% here. It shows, we wanted to measure a bit what's the degree of autonomy these municipalities on the lowest level of the Swiss government actually have. And maybe the last slide for today, on the national level, I introduced you to these instruments from, we say from bottom up, where you have to collect these signatures, right? So either you go against legislation or you introduce something new. For these two instruments, you have to collect signatures. But who uses these instruments, actually? It's not just citizen movements or NGOs. In the Swiss system, and here you see the historical statistics in different. You can see in general that the numbers are increasing, so we have more and more of these votes. But the initiators also are the parties in government. So in Switzerland, as a party sitting in government, you use these tools as well. Because in government we have like the 4 biggest political parties, they all sit in the government. And I got the question in the break, who actually sits in government? We don't have a president, we have a council of 7 ministers, right? And throughout the talk here, I think you realize that political power in Switzerland is really dispersed, right? And that's maybe one of the secrets besides this direct democratic political culture, that power is dispersed. Nobody, and there's it's mutual control of what you can do. So the citizens control what the politicians do, but the politicians also control each other. If they wouldn't do so, there's always a chance that somebody goes against them with a citizen initiative or blocking law that already passed parliament. So they occasionally, parties in government, have to come up with something new or a suggestion to keep them in the game, right? So you keep yourself as a party in the game by using these instruments. So the function here is power maintenance. And power competition was very big when we had these fights between the Protestants and the Catholics in these founding years, in the second half, until proportional electoral system was introduced. We had these power struggles between the Catholics and Protestants, between the Social Democrats and the bourgeois parties, between the urban cantons and the rural cantons, between the French-speaking and the German-speaking, Italian-speaking cantons, and so forth. So here you can see that the parties in opposition, until they got co-opted into government, they used these instruments heavily to oppose national level legislation. And then once they're co-opted into government, it goes down, right? But civil society got stronger. Why did civil society includes professional organizations, it includes NGOs and so forth. They are now heavily using these instruments, and the use by them increased. Also to promote maybe also environmental protection and so forth was heavily, they used these instruments heavily, and that increased also over time. Why civil society? Because they're much better organized than they used to be, and despite the fact that also in Swiss politics, some people say it's difficult to organize, and it's more difficult these days to organize these signature collections. The numbers say otherwise, actually. So the numbers say that we have more and more of these referendum votes, and NGOs are capable of using these tools as well. But we have some more questions here.
Yeah, I have a question. There is an experience of a parallel power, like a mafia, a secta, terrorists, narcotraficants, some kind of organization that is illegal or a parallel power using or capturing the power in some place inside of Switzerland?
Difficult to say whether you mean whether these tools are also like captured by like extremist non-democratic forces. I don't see this happening because I think control is it's control and transparency is kind of guaranteed. We have, I would still, there's problems of course, but we have free association rights, we have free press still. I don't see this happening, I would say. I wouldn't go down that road. I wouldn't, of course it's heavily used, if you say, of course financial interests, big corporations, their lobby organizations, they use it as well. Of course it's used, and they have political parties representing them in parliament and also using these. But there's plenty of examples where, and I will talk about this tomorrow probably, also about political campaigning, or maybe not tomorrow, but in one of the sessions this week, how these political battles and the campaigning is organized. And of course money plays a role. So maybe it a little bit comes in there. And I will talk about this more.
Yeah, you actually started answering the question I was going to ask. So how does political capture work in Switzerland? Like, can you look at it through the public choice economics lens?
Can you rephrase the question? I didn't fully...
Do you know the field of public choice in economics? So it's the field that described political capture, special interest groups, you know, Mancur Olson, Richard Stigler, the University of Chicago people. Like, are you able to look at Switzerland through this lens?
I can bring it up when we discuss the campaigning, right? So I will do this in another session.
The higher level deciding if the lower level cannot agree on things, that kind of defaulting, do you think it is central to political stability?
Yes, I think that's why in Switzerland it usually for things to permit to the higher level takes a long time, right? So it first has to, there's plenty of examples for democratic innovation or opening up, allowing integrating more circles into politics. But this all took a long time. And of course the higher levels, sometimes they don't want that, right? So, and you have to overcome these hurdles. And sometimes with the small historical example showed that in the early days, like by the mass of people and almost a little bit of force enforcing it with these, showing up with the sticks in front of the government, in a way you would say protesting. And it needs also a free society where this is possible, so that democratic innovation on a higher level can take place. But in this system, it takes a long time to travel, I would say. And you could maybe think of, when you add digital democratic tools, maybe we can think in future sessions, we can think of faster ways to innovate in this respect. But it's of course this hierarchical setting also in the big diversity and heterogeneity we already have in Switzerland. It kind of helps to keep everything in balance. Otherwise, it might grow out of hand, quite possible.
Will you be talking more about subsidiarity in future conversations? I mean, that relates to this somewhat. Yeah.
I haven't planned this, but it's kind of The way it's organized in Switzerland, yeah, it's highly, I think it's one of the countries where subsidiarity is really high. So the lower levels do everything, the higher levels do not absolutely have to do. But in practice also, then it's, let's say you have national legislation, and the national level usually doesn't implement. We don't have national agencies that implement. You need the lower levels to implement. So in practice, it's highly integrated. So really, it's a marble cake. It's not a layer cake with 3 different layers. It's a marble cake, and I would say every 30 years, it's kind of a new negotiation of, and a reform also, federalism reform. We go through federalism reform. Who is doing what? But it's a constant debate of who is doing what. And with this little example here, I showed you that, yeah, in theory, municipalities can do whatever, and schools and building roads and so forth. They have all these competencies, but in practice, these days, we have a strong centralizing force. It's there, I think.
Oh yeah, it'd be interesting to compare to Australia and US, where they have states that if it's not enumerated, the states get it, but then also it seems, at least I know more about this, US, it's being centralized federalist quite quickly in modernity. And another issue that I is interesting to me from your conversation is, since Parliament isn't paid, what the demographics are, people can actually be parliamentarians.
Yeah, okay, that's another interesting point. What helps here to keep this subsidiarity principle high in the priority list is that the cantons and the municipalities, they have their own budgets. They can collect taxes, right? So we have, and actually the federal tax is much lower. So the highest taxes are collected on the cantonal level and the municipal level. The national tax is quite low, and for decades it used to be provisionary. So national parliament always had to, yes, we give ourselves the competence to collect taxes, but it's if you look at the percentage, it's quite low what they collect on the national level. So that helps to keep up the subsidiarity principle when you have your own money, right? Yeah. I don't know, was there more?
One question about accessibility. So how many different ways can you cast that vote? So you mentioned mail, in person, but can I pass it on to somebody else to elect? How many different ways can you cast the ballot?
On the voting channels per se, I have a session planned for that, but you cannot really pass it on, actually. But it's, yeah, I need to elaborate a bit on that, so in a future session as well. Sorry for that. Yeah, but it will come up here. And yeah, I mean, how are they? The pay for MPs is of course higher on the national level because, but it's not. You're not being member of the parliament on national level is not considered to be a profession in Switzerland. You're not congressperson as a job. You go in there for the 4 annual sessions. So you actually move. You go to Bern. You have a 3-week session, and then you go back to your job. That's theory. In practice these days, of course you have committee meetings taking place before the sessions, you have committee meetings after the sessions, so it turned into a de facto 50% job, I would say. You need 50% of your time and you get a decent pay for that, but it's nowhere as high as in other countries. And if you go lower level, cantonal level, and even municipal level in parliament, this is considered, it's your hobby, basically. You do this because you want to do it. But there's also what you hinted at, that, yeah, who can afford to be in parliament? So what they do is either you're well off and you can afford it, or somehow the party, also especially, they have jobs for you somehow. So this kind of, if you are in power as a political party, if there's one thing you have control over a couple of jobs. So this is how it works. So they get a 50% here, and for the rest of the 50% you work as an MP. At least on the national level, that's how it works. But on the local level, I really have to say, I mean, those people working on the local level, they really do it in their free time. It's a lot of unpaid work. It's a lot of evenings and weekends they spend. And I really have to say that it's really also part of the political culture to do that. And it's some kind of highly valued activity, which is quite common. And more and more difficult to find people willing to do it also, especially on the municipal level. It's sometimes hard to find people who are still willing to donate their time and do this. In some extreme cases, you almost have to force someone to do it, right? In some municipal charters, they have this clause that they can force people to contribute to the self-governance of the municipality. But only in very rare cases they have to resort back to this extreme measure.
I have a similar question. You mentioned the attention that people need to pay to these referendums throughout the year, and then if you get more engaged as a member of local parliament, it's even more time and energy you have to commit. So how does that work on a daily basis for the average Swiss person? How much time do they really commit to that and energy compared to other countries? And would you say, is that working out well, or is it very draining and sort of pushing responsibility in a not healthy, not sustainable way? How would you evaluate that?
I think, it puts an extra burden in a way, but on the other hand, you maybe get this feeling that I have a say and my voice is taken into account. Some days I lose, sometimes I win. So it gives you a good feeling. They cannot do everything they like. We have a bit of control, a bit of veto power. So this gives you a good feeling. But then you have to, if you want to do it seriously, you have to read all these documents. And most people, let's say if you're experienced and you know Swiss politics, you can take these shortcuts, you know where this comes from politically, so you can say, I'm close to this political party, they're against it, so I'm also against it. So this is kind of shortcut. And I personally, I just skim through it and I know kind of where this leads, and doesn't take me that much time, you know.
Maybe for future conversation, is this changing with new media, with algorithms, social media, where people, where disinformation can spread more easily? Do you feel like this is getting better or worse compared to the last decades?
It's social media is becoming a little bit more important, but it's by far not the most important source of information. We also do a lot of surveys. We know at least people tell us how they stay informed on these matters. And these brochures, these pamphlets, they by far the most important source of information. So that's always on top of the list. Then it's kind of the traditional news for national matters, TV, radio, a bit older generation, and social media is growing, but it's really not high on the priority list. Yeah. All right, so I think we're a little bit over time. Thanks for the dialogue and the questions, was great, and I will go into some more topics during the week, so it will be announced. Thank you for being here.